Buongiorno a tutti. And that is the end of my Italian speech. So, well, my only legitimacy here, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a lawyer, I'm worst, I'm an activist. So my legitimacy is to be active and in the past having some results in the field of religious freedom. And so from that point of view, I have a bad news for lawyers. Well, you all know the bad news, but I will repeat it. Law is not enough. Why? Because we have, at least in Europe, a lot of good laws that protect religious freedom. And many constitutional provisions that guarantee religious freedom. But we still have a lot of issues on religious freedom. Of course, because the law, in theory, could be a science. In practical, in the real world, it's more a martial art. Any lawyer knows that it's a martial art. Judges, it's human justice, you know, it's not divine justice. And human justice has this small peculiarity, which is that it lacks sometimes of humanity. And some judges are good judges. Some judges are bad judges. Not in this room, I mean, in the outside. So you have, with the same law, very different effects. With the same law, you will have some judgments which will be very positive for religious freedom and some which will be very negative for religious freedom. Because there is discrimination that comes from prejudice. And judges are human. At the same time, even when you have good judgments, the question of implementation of these decisions is crucial. Let's speak about for example, the UN Committee on Human Rights. In the United Nations, you have a committee who is in charge to render decisions on violations of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And it can give very good decisions. One of them, three of them actually, concern the Sikhs in France. You know that in France there is this law of 2004 that forbids religious symbols at school. For the Sikhs, it's a problem because the children need to wear a turban. So they are kicked out from schools because they don't want to take off their turban. And the Committee of Human Rights of the UN renders at least two decisions on this, asking France to change the law. And the covenant has been signed by France. But even the doctrine will say that, well, it's not really binding. So of course, if you say to a state, you know, we render a decision, but it's not really binding, you can be sure that they will not do anything with it. So the law is still exactly the same, and the Sikhs still have the same problem. But even the European Court of Human Rights, everybody knows that it's completely binding. The problem is that, for example, let's say that we talked about Russia. You know, Russia does not implement some decision of the European Court of Human Rights. More than that, around a year ago, they voted a law that says that when there is a decision from the European Court of Human Rights, this decision can be submitted by the state to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court will say if the decision is correct and fits with the constitution of the Russian Federation, and if not, then the state do not have to apply it. This is Russia, but even in the European Union, Hungary changed a law in 2011 and they registered hundreds of religious movements in Hungary. And these movements could not register again because it's very complicated and you need to have a vote of the parliament of 2/3 of the parliament to be registered again. And before to go to the parliament there is many steps and you have not many chance to do it. So many religious movements went to the European courts, they won, and actually the decision was that this law was to be cancelled or reformed in a better way, you know. But the answer, even from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, was, oh, you know, this is Council of Europe. Council of Europe is not European Union, it's not binding. So they completely invented a new way to consider the European Court of Human Rights, you know. Council of Europe is not binding. So that was just to say that even if we have good laws, there is a lot to do for having this law effective. Well, what is the most, I think, important thing if we want to fight for religious freedom, and we need to understand what is the biggest threat to religious freedom. And I think I won't be wrong if I say that it is prejudice. Prejudice against movements we do not know. It's very easy to be bad to a movement that everybody has a prejudice that it is a bad movement. If you say that a movement is a cult or a sect, well, nobody will tell you that you are doing something wrong if you attack them. And it works also, let's say, for Muslims. If you, today, in many countries of Europe, if you say that somebody is a Salafist, it's exactly the same that if you said that he is a terrorist. I'm not saying it's the truth. I'm saying it, in the mind of the people, it's exactly the same. So there is big prejudice because these people who speak about cults, Salafist terrorism, Islam terrorism, and other prejudice, they do not know anything about this movement. It's not a question of thinking that this movement is good or bad. This is opinion. I'm talking about facts. So prejudice is a very big problem. And of course, media is the first vector of prejudice. Now the good news with media is very weak in terms of influencing people. That being said, it's very weak, but when there is no information, even this weakness is what people will listen to. If you have no information on a movement and the press says something, people will listen to the press. So we need a force stronger than the media, which is not very difficult, but it needs to be done to fill the vacuum, and with filling the vacuum, getting rid of the prejudice. And I would like to tell you a little story. A very non-important story, because it's a story which takes, actually I was in a Turkish fast food. And I was in Brussels in a Turkish fast food, and it was the day of the attacks, terrorist attacks in Paris. And I was waiting for my sandwich. And the guy who was supposed to make my sandwich, he was looking at the TV, and they were speaking about the attacks, and he was completely upset. He was upset, of course, because of the dead people of the attacks, but also he was a Muslim, and he was telling, you know, it's horrible now, people will hate us even more than before. And us as Muslims, because of these terrorists, we are going to be discriminated against more, and he was completely upset. It was very sincere upset. As I said, in addition to the upset of the dead people. And I told him, maybe because I wanted my sandwich, but anyway, I told him, you know, don't think that everyone is doing the mistake to confuse Islam and terrorism. It's not true. Maybe the media wants you to think that, maybe people told you that, but it's not true. And I said, you know, I'm fighting for the right of people to have their own faith, and I will fight for your right, and every day of my life I spend time saying that what people think is your religion, it's not the truth, and they should learn more. And he was very happy with that. And I gave him my card of the European Forum for Interreligious, European Interreligious Forum for Religious Freedom. I gave him my card, and he was very happy, and he said, are you a Muslim? I said, no, I'm not a Muslim. He said, well, what are you? And he said, I said, I'm a Scientologist, you know. And then he looked at me and he said, you know what? You Scientologists, you are very good guys. I will spread it everywhere. I said, thank you, you know, that's fine. And then I walked away and I went back to my Scientology community and I told to Scientologists, you know, I said, do you feel discriminated sometimes? They said, yes. And I said, well, you should start defending Islam. They said, why? I said, because if you defend Islam, at least the Muslim that you will defend and their friends, they will think that you are good people. It will be better, you know, if you defend yourself, nobody will think that you are good people. If you defend them, at least they will think that. And then I went to the Muslims and I said, have you ever defended a Scientologist? And the ones I met that day, they said, no. Why? And I said, because if you do that, I can tell you, I will tell it to the Scientologists I know, and they will think that Islam is good. And of course, it works for everyone. And why do I say that? Very simply because religious freedom is not a matter of what is your faith. Religious freedom is a matter of humanity. And you need to be willing to defend the religious freedom of others, people you don't believe the same faith, you know, if you want to have an effect. And it has a practical effect. As I said, if everyone was defending the religious freedom rights of others, there would be no more problem of religious freedom on earth. Because together, we are much more stronger. And practically speaking, winning a legal case, being alone for a religious movement or somebody who has religious trouble with justice is not possible. It's very possible if you are allied with others. And European Union, as well as Greater Europe, we all know that there are problems of religious freedom. And these problems of religious freedom could be overcome only if there is an alliance. An alliance with religions all together. An alliance of religions with scholars. An alliance with religions, scholars, politicians who care about religious freedom. It's much more powerful than trying to do something alone. And that's my experience in the field of religious freedom for years now. And it's an experience that is based on how do you win and how do you lose. And actually, I prefer to win. And small wins, at the end, will guarantee religious freedom for all. Of course, when you do it, you do not do it for your own interest. You do it for the common good. You do it because you believe in religious freedom, and this is the basis of this fight for religious freedom. So, to conclude, I would say that I'm very thankful to be here. I wanted to give this message not because it's a very intellectual one, it's more a practical one, and it can change, if we do that, it can change the face of Europe regarding religious freedom. And I will conclude finally in Italian. Grazie mille.